Thank you all for tuning in to another edition of Outside the Shop, where I get to talk about everything that I normally don't get to talk about on my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you guys can all find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts from. So, got a lot to talk about today. Also, by the way, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just type in Daryl Lane. Should have put the link below, but I will do that for the next episode. But a lot to talk about in the NFL today and in college football as well. So first, I want to talk about Monday night, Raiders versus Ravens. Good quarterback battle between Lamar Jackson and Derek Carr. Folks, the Raiders are for real. They won spectacular fashion, 35-27 in overtime. The Raiders are for real, though. Derek Carr, when he's on all cylinders, peak Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Now, bad Derek Carr can be like around 20 in the NFL, but Derek Carr is best. If Derek Carr is going to throw for 400 yards every game and be a top 10 quarterback, then the Raiders are in business, and that makes them a threat as a wild card contender. Also, Darren Waller. A lot of people like to mention Travis Kelce. A lot of people like to mention George Kittle. Darren Waller's up there with those guys. He is an amazing receiving tight end. He's extremely athletic for the position. He can run routes, and a lot of these linebackers, they just can't cover the guy. So I think the Raiders, I think they're going to be an interesting play. I think John Gruden's a pretty solid coach, and they already have one win under their belt against the Ravens. And when it comes down to playoff time, this is a win that's going to be used for tiebreakers. Now, if the Ravens and the Raiders have the same record, the Raiders go. The Ravens stay at home. So I think that's something very important. And on that note, I want to go to the Ravens. I think the Ravens are in an interesting scenario. I know a lot of people thought they would make the playoffs at the end of the year, and I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment with just one game. But here's what I want to say on the Ravens. The Ravens are in a very tricky scenario. The AFC North is the toughest division in the AFC. Right, it's probably the AFC North, the toughest. Then the second toughest, I'd say, is the AFC East. Then the third is the AFC West, and then the fourth is the AFC South. They're going to have to play the Steelers twice. They're going to have to play the Browns twice. The Bengals just beat Minnesota. I think the Bengals are going to be a pretty serious team, a team that you can't just say, hey, we're going to win this game today. So that's 6 tough divisional games that the Ravens are going to have to account for. I think also when you look at their schedule and you also look at them, I don't know if they lost the Raiders, right? I already mentioned that's a team that's ahead of them right now in the standings. Like, could they lose to a Patriots, right? New England or a Miami team, who I actually think are better, more well-balanced teams than a team like the Las Vegas Raiders. So that's something to watch out for. And also the Ravens, they've had injuries. Guys like the running back for J.K. Dobbins, he's out. He's out for the season. And, running of Lamar Jackson, that's still the best thing they do. I think becoming a little bit more predictable. And as we see, the team that won had the quarterback who threw for more yards in the air. And also something that I think is important to be on the lookout for, Lamar Jackson's not vaccinated. So if any point in the season he can't play, the NFL has, because he's unvaccinated, he's out. Like, that can really hurt the Ravens. Because if he's not out there, then we're in trouble, folks. It could get very ugly. You lose a couple games, and I think they're getting that 8 to maybe 10-win threshold. You lose a couple games, that could take you right out of the running for the postseason. Next up, Clay Helton, fired from USC. It was really interesting. I was looking at this. In 8 seasons with the Trojans, Clay 6-24 overall record and 5 bowl appearances. Not as you may think, but it's USC, the top brand to college football, best brand out west, and the Pac-12 for sure. And that hasn't happened in years since Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Pete Carroll was there. With Clay Helton now being fired, I think here's some names that you look out for, and some names that were mentioned. James Franklin. I thought that's interesting. I don't think he has any ties to California, but he left Vanderbilt. He left Vanderbilt to go to Penn State, a better opportunity. I think USC is a better opportunity than Penn State. I think it's a more hollowed program in general. I also think it gets rid of the big bad boogeyman in the Big Ten that is Ohio State. The Big Ten East is the toughest division, is the second toughest division in all of college football, only surpassed by the SEC West. So he gets out of all of that. and gets to play in the Pac-12. Obviously, the recruiting in California and in the West is amazing. So I think James Franklin, who's a very good recruiter, will be able to take advantage of that. So I think that is something interesting to look out for. Also, Luke Fickell, he is the coach at Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bearcats have been very good as of late. I think he's somebody that we could potentially be looking. I think maybe this could have had a little bit more steam before it was announced that I believe Cincinnati is going to be in the Big 12. But, USC's a much better job, just quite frankly. It's a way better job than Cincinnati. And you kind of want in coaching, you want to kind of move up when you've done everything you can do at a certain program. You've gotten the program to its absolute peak, its absolute pinnacle, then you have to go someplace else. And I think, obviously, the potential at USC is much higher than a place like Cincinnati. Also, Urban Meyer, that was a name that's mentioned. I think, don't be shocked, folks, if Urban Meyer ends up being the coach of the USC Trojans. I was kind of calling this when he retired from Ohio State a few years ago, that I could see him either going to USC or Notre Dame. Obviously, it's not going to happen Notre Dame with Brian Kelly there, but I could see Urban Meyer jumping ship. Remember, folks, when Nick Saban, about 15 years ago, he was coaching the Miami Dolphins, and he kept saying, I am not going to be the head coach at Alabama. I am not going to be the head coach of Alabama. I am not going to be the head coach of Alabama. He said that. You guys can go YouTube it. Go look it up. He kept saying, I am not going to be that coach of Alabama. And obviously, guess what happened, folks? Head coach of Alabama, 7 championships later. Urban Meyer leaves Florida, says, I want to spend time with my family. Then a couple years later, hey, screw the family. It's Ohio State. Then he's like, I got a cyst in my head at Ohio State. I need to retire. Then he's like, the Jacksonville Jaguars to get to go. Trevor Lawrence. Urban Meyer is a guy that jumps ship quickly. Do not be surprised if USC makes the right offer. One of the best programs in all college football, one of the most blue blood programs in all of college football. He gets there, and with the recruiting and with how good of Coach Urban Meyer is on the college football level, he can turn them into a superpower. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Also, Matt Campbell of Iowa State, I think that would also be interesting. I think he's true. He's been true to Iowa State. I don't really see him leaving, but he's one of the top coaches in college football, and I think he's somebody that they should look at. Also, Bill O'Brien. He's now the offensive coordinator for Alabama. We've seen Alabama offensive coordinators get head coaching jobs. Look at Lane Kiffin. He was at Alabama, then he goes to FAU. Now he's at Ole Miss. You look at a Steve Sarkisian. Now he is at Texas. Bill O'Brien, really good year. Has a really good year this year. Obviously, we're seeing Bryce Young and that offense is humming. Don't be surprised if USC calls. And also, he did a very good job the first year rebuilding Penn State from the Jerry Sandusky scandal, right? I thought he was a solid coach for the Texans. And as we, see, there's been some dark days with Houston, right? A lot of people hated Bill O'Brien, but I think he's a pretty solid, damn good football coach, right? And lastly, of the names, I have Joe Brady, offensive coordinator for LSU the year they won the national championship. He's now the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. I think he would be an amazing pickup. This guy needs a head coaching opportunity. I thought he was the reason that LSU won their national championship. It's not Ed Orgeron, and we've seen Ed Orgeron get exposed as of late. I think you get him with all the quarterbacks that are out west and in the state of California. You get him with a quarterback. You get it off system rolling. We could see USC back. We could see Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. I truly believe that. Get Joe Brady in there and watch what he does. I think some special things would happen. And lastly, I'm going to give my first 4 in, last 4 out for the college football playoff race as of today. So number 1, Alabama, need no explanation. They're most dominant team. Number 2, Georgia. I have Georgia as my number 2 team. They've been dominant as well, and they have that win over Clemson. At number 3, I have Oklahoma. They're still undefeated. I think there are some concerns, but I think they have the best quarterback in the nation, the Heisman front runner, and a guy who could potentially be the number 1 overall pick in this upcoming draft. And Spencer Rattler. So I'm going to go Oklahoma at 3. At number 4, Oregon, just going to the horseshoe at Ohio State and beating them. And let me remind you, the time difference also, by the way. Big time difference between being in Oregon out west and going to East Coast time in Ohio. Big difference, right? Biological clockwise. And they shredded them. They led from start to finish. They let no doubt their star, I'm going to butcher his name, but number 5, who's projected to be a top 5 in this coming NFL draft. To see a lot of mocks that have him number 1. He wasn't playing. They also had a couple other starters out, and they led Ohio State to start to finish. So Oregon is at number 4. At number 5, I have Ohio State. Despite the defense being very suspect, CJ Stroud, I'm not completely sold on him. They're still Ohio State, and they've shown that they can at least be competitive and put up points. I mean, they've Minnesota, who I think is a pretty good team, and they were close. It was a 28-35 game with Oregon. I have Ohio State number 5. At number 6, I have Clemson. They need to show me more before they can move up, but really good defense. I need to see more from their quarterback, DJ. At number 7, I have Cincinnati. Put respect on Cincinnati's name. My good friend Ben Karen, host of the Sports Wilder podcast, hates Cincinnati, but I think Cincinnati is going to have a quarterback who's going to get a lot of draft buzz. They're returning most of their starters from last year's team, and they have shredded their first 2 in competition. And at number 8, I'm going with, speaking of Ben, his Texas A&M Aggies at number 8. A pitiful game on the road against Colorado. The offense not very good, but they found a way to win. But I'm going to pick Texas A&M at 8, and that is my first 4 in, last 4 out. If the playoffs start today, I would have Alabama as my 1 seed, Georgia as my 2 seed, Oklahoma as my 3 seed, and Oregon as my 4 seed. So we see Alabama versus Oregon in the first and the semis, and Georgia versus Oklahoma. I think those could make for some pretty entertaining matchups. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. Thank you. Check out the podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast from. Have a great day, and